When it comes to applying the information from Neville Goddard effectively, and by that it is meant very specifically to produce results, Matthew 7:16, ye shall know them by their fruits. The fruits. It is key to know exactly what Neville Goddard is pointing to throughout all of his lectures, his books, etc. When he says something like, what you now desire, you already have, and you seek it only because you have already found it. You found it in the form of desire. So, if I ask an individual a question, and let's say they don't know who they are, chances are, if I say to them, what is it that you desire? And they may say, I desire this relationship, or I desire that car, or I desire to have this amount of money in my bank account, you name it. And then if I ask them a question, if you have that money in your bank account, if you drive that car, if you have that relationship, will you be fulfilled? And they say yes. And then I ask another question. Do you feel fulfilled now? And they may say, no, I don't feel fulfilled now. And then if I ask them why, they may say something like, because I don't have this car, or I don't have this relationship, or I don't have this money in my bank account, or whatever kind of material possession, you name it. So then I ask another question. I say, are you suggesting that only when you get these material possessions, only when you physically have this relationship, only when you physically get these material possessions, you can be fulfilled? And they say yes. And then I ask another question. I say, where are you going to experience this fulfillment? And no shame in condemnation. I love these fruits. Wonderful car, money, etc. Wonderful fruits. Matthew 7:16, ye shall know them by their fruits. And the fruits can be whatsoever things ye desire. Mark 11:24, pray as though ye have received it, and it will be yours. So, no shame in condemnation as to the fruits of fulfillment. There seems to be a condition here. The condition is that only when you get this particular materialization or outcome or relationship, then you can be fulfilled. And they say, yeah, that makes sense. If I look around in my world, everyone is looking to get this or that, and then they can be fulfilled. They are chasing fulfillment. And I say, well, all this information points to, through the various books, throughout the lectures, throughout the scriptures of the world, is the fact that you are that which you are seeking for. You are already that which you desire to be. You are already that. And you already have what you desire. And as you said, you can only experience fulfillment after you materialize it. That's illusory. And then they may say, what do you mean by that? It's illusory. Of course, as soon as they materialize, that's when I experience fulfillment. And I said, that's not what is being pointed to. I said, that is conditional fulfillment. It seems that you put a condition saying that only when you get this thing, whatever it may be, relationship, personal experience, etc., then you can be fulfilled. Now, let me ask you another question. What was the experience like? What was the experience like on the journey to manifesting that? And they said, well, it's stress, frustration. Sometimes it was great, sometimes not. But that's just the way it is. And I said, that's because you were conditioning the appearances. No shame, no condemnation. Unknowingly. And then they may say, what do you mean by that? Unknowingly. And and by that it is meant forgetting who you are. You persist in delusion. You think you are not fulfilled. You think a condition needs to be there in order to be fulfilled, and that generates suffering. You have not realized what all this information points to, and when we read something like this quote here from Neville Goddard, it might not make any sense. What you now desire, you already have, and you seek it only because you have already found it. You found it in the form of desire. What is desire pointing to? You say, I don't know. Suffering, stress, frustration. I said, where did you get these interpretations from? Nonetheless, in the Bible, it states, whatsoever things ye desire. Mark 11:24, pray as though ye have received it, and it will be yours. Why would it say that? If desire pointed to suffering and stress and frustration, why would it say it in the Bible? And, for whatever the reason they may come up with. Well, what it's pointing to is the fact that you are fulfilled. What you're seeking for is fulfillment. Pray as though ye have received it proves the point that when you do pray as though you have received it, immediately you experience fulfillment. Immediately you experience fulfillment. So in other words, the person thinks that only when they materially get what they desire, then they can be fulfilled. And if they don't have what they desire materially, they cannot be fulfilled. And as a result of not knowing who they are, which is the fulfillment that they seek for, that's what desire points to. Desire points to the fact that you are fulfilled. You are completely fulfilled. That still I am presence is the fulfillment you were seeking for your whole life. That is the love, the happiness, the peace, the bliss, the fulfillment. As I say sometimes, you are the love, the happiness, the peace, the bliss, the fulfillment that you were seeking for. That person may say, I thought it was God. God was the love, happiness, peace, bliss, fulfillment that I was seeking for. In which my response, do you think in terms of separation from God? I understand what you're saying. God is the source of love, happiness, peace, bliss, fulfillment. Yet God, self, desire, fulfillment, intention are one. To assume otherwise would generate illusions of separation, and that is what's generating the suffering. You may think that you need a condition to be met outwardly in order to experience fulfillment. Yet all those things that we call fulfilling, all those symbols of fulfillment, happen naturally in flow from the premise of being as you are, completely fulfilled. That's what Mark 11:24 is pointing to. It's pointing to the fact that you have what you desire. You are already that which you desire to be. And they may ask the question, well then, should I get these things that I want? The relationship, the car. And I said, these are things that are naturally added unto you in flow. These are the whatsoever things ye desire. They are naturally added unto you. You experience fulfillment with or without them. You experience love, happiness, peace, bliss, fulfillment, if those physical material possessions are there or not. And that is the good news. And the person might ask, well, what does that got to do with getting what I want? And then my response is, do you want to get what you want in a way that's stress, frustration, seeking, suffering, or do you want to let these things be added onto you? Seek ye first the kingdom, and all these things will be added onto you. When you know who you are, then you know that you are completely fulfilled, and all desire points to is the fulfillment of who you are. Knowing who you are is the complete fulfillment of the law. And it just naturally manifests as you being as you are. As all these things, like for example, I may get some emails or DMs on how can I get the money that I want? All these things happen naturally in flow. And again, ye shall know them by their fruits. I came across this information back in 2004 through a book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And in there, he said the same thing differently that Neville Goddard is saying. So again, Neville Goddard said, what you now desire, you already have, and you seek it only because you already found it. You found it in the form of desire. What Napoleon Hill says is, if you have a burning desire, that is the definite chief aim. In other words, the same thing that Mark 11:24 says. He just said it in his way, Napoleon Hill style. I say it my way. Neville says it his way. You say it your way. It's pointing to the same thing. You are completely fulfilled. As you know that you have what you desire, everything spontaneously happens. And any resistance along the way is the result of forgetting who you are. You are that everlasting, eternal fulfillment. Wouldn't the way be paved with experiences of love, happiness, peace, bliss, fulfillment rather than suffering? You're still going to manifest that which you desire as you are already that. And all these worries and concerns along the way are not there as you remain as you are, completely fulfilled. You are that fulfillment that you were seeking for. That's what he meant when he said, what you now desire, you already have. You seek it only because you already found it. You found it in the form of desire. Napoleon Hill said it. He called it definite chief aim. Okay. So I committed to this definite chief aim, and it happened. I got out of $50,000 debt. I had enough money in my bank account to buy my first house. I applied the information, the same information we're talking about here. All this did was release the resistance along the way. As when you know you are already that, it just naturally happens. You don't try to make it happen. You don't force it to make it happen. It just naturally happens in flow. So what happened then is I applied the information to move up in my corporate career. And then the desire emerged to start my IT business, which I did in 2009 and built a success. And then a consulting practice, this YouTube channel, etc., etc., etc. And over the years through this channel, I have consulted and coached with a number of individuals who have become millionaires, doing exactly what we're talking about in this video. They know that they are already that which they desire to be, and they remain in flow, being completely fulfilled. Anytime they forgot who they are, we had a conversation about who they are. And the ways of how they went about doing it naturally, spontaneously happen. What was interesting is I built an IT business to success, so I went into consulting with the experience, my 10 years corporate experience, building the IT business to success, areas of innovation, sales, marketing, operations, finance, leadership. And in consulting, I saw thousands and thousands of ways of optimizing each of those areas. Thousands of ways of, even when it comes to the operations, optimization, automation, delegation, elimination, part or in whole or in combination. Thousands and thousands and thousands of ways. Yet for every individual, their way is the best way. Ye shall know them by their fruits, because when I connect the dots looking backwards and we have a conversation, it's, oh yeah, I realized that I was fulfilled in that regard. Some way, somehow it happened. If there was any resistance along the way, those were opportunity points to know who I am. Now, this was very well articulated in a book called Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. So I'm going to go through this 5 steps here, which I consolidated into this mind map. Step number 1, your built-in success mechanism must have a goal or target. So we know the infinite power of God has ways that I might not know of. I may have some ideas, I may have some theories, but there are ways that have never been discovered yet. Or there are ways that have been discovered yet that if they are the ways to be brought into fruition, then they will. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. I can of myself do nothing, the Father would then do it the work. And he says it in his style. Maxwell Maltz says it. He says the goal or the target must be conceived of as already in existence now, either in actual or potential form. So desire means having. Mark 11:24. Whatsoever things you desire, pray as though you have received it. You have received it, and it will be yours. Desire means having, even if you don't see it here. Even if nobody in this world has ever seen it happen. When I was building my IT business and my style of doing things, even when I was building this YouTube channel, my consulting practice, etc., there were people that would come up to me and say, why do you do it this way? This other person says you should do it that way, or the proven method, or whatever is this other way. Listen, these are just some of the ways that we know of from the infinite ways. And my way is the best way. And God takes me on a journey. My style is the best style. Remember, God, self, intention, desire, fulfillment are one. I am fulfilled thus. I just remain as I am along the way. Along the way, I remain as I am. All these things happen naturally. If it happens this way, great. If it happens that way, great. If it happens in a way that was in a book, great. If it happens in a way that was talked about in a business training, great. And if it doesn't, great. What I found was a lot of times it happened in ways that were not discussed in books. Now, there may be similarities. We can categorize it in some of the things that we saw, commonalities, for example, that I put in my book, The Direct Path to $1 Million, Turn What You Already Have into a Fortune. If you're interested in that, I'll link in the description to it. Yet all of us start from the same position, including these individuals that became millionaires. They started off with this vision. Desire arose, and they immediately saw themselves in possession of that which they desire. They immediately saw themselves in their imagination being the individual that they desire to be. Desire points to fulfillment. They are that. They're prophecies. Now, if they looked around to this world, they might not have seen that happen in their family, within their groups of friends. Doesn't matter. What matters is the vision. Very precise. The vision matters. Everything else gets taken care of by God. God does everything. Number 2, the automatic mechanism is teleological. That is, operates or is oriented to end results, goals, or visions, as he had mentioned in point number 1. Conceived of as already in existence now, in imagination. It is that way in imagination. I learned something interesting about the subconscious mind many years ago, that it cannot tell the difference between what is visible through the 5 senses or what is imagined. How interesting is that? So in other words, you can imagine anything, and body will start to play it out as theater. The world will start to play it out as theater. Now, I recommend imagining from the premise of fulfillment, from the premise of knowing who you are. So you are that which you desire to be, as Neville Goddard said. What you now desire, you already have. You seek it only because you already found it. You found it in the form of desire. You are that which you imagine yourself to be. And then he says, do not be discouraged because the means whereby may not be apparent. It is the function of the automatic mechanism to supply the means whereby, where you supply the goal. God does everything. I don't worry about things. I can of myself do nothing. The Father within doeth the work. He says, think in terms of the end result, and the means whereby will often take care of themselves. Number 3, do not be afraid of making mistakes or of temporary failures. All servo mechanisms achieve a goal by negative feedback or by going forward, making mistakes and immediately correcting course. Now, if you read between the lines here, what he's actually saying is there's no such thing as mistakes. There's no such thing as failures. There's no such thing as negative feedback. There's no such thing. These are interpretations. Everything happens naturally and spontaneously in flow. See, the person can interpret it. They can say, oh, this is a mistake. That means that I have a problem. That means I am not perfect, which is illusory. That still I am presence is the perfection that you are looking for, and you are that still I am presence. Which means regardless of how this world appears, you remain as you are, perfectly still as perfection. Ananda, bliss, happiness, joy, peace. You are fulfilled as that still I am presence. To prove the point, and I put a section in this in my book, anytime the individual is identified with a particular belief, suggesting that there's a problem with them, they're not perfect, they can do nothing to release identification in the moment and abide as that still I am presence. And emotions are released, they no longer identify with those thoughts, and body naturally flows. It happens naturally. So like, for example, I learned how to snowboard a number of years ago. I'm staring at the mountains again. As everyone knows, I've moved up north to Blue Mountains, Ontario. And now I get to look at the mountains when I make these videos. And in a number of months, I'll be snowboarding on them. I have fallen a number of times. In entrepreneurship, we have run a number of ad campaigns. We've done a number of things. Every single what the person would interpret as a mistake or a failure or negative feedback is not a problem. It's just an interpretation that that's a problem. Do you see how precise this is? And as you know, that still I am presence is fulfillment. You remain fulfilled regardless of how it appears. Another person may interpret it and say, oh, there's some failure going on there, but you are completely fulfilled. So you don't have a problem. The other person may think that they have a problem, but that's not your concern. You don't have any concern, actually. You remain as you are and flow. That won't even faze you, and you wouldn't even think that if you saw a person say that, because only you can imagine what they think. So even if they use those words, oh, you are a failure, in your mind, you're like, okay, servo mechanism doing its job. Is that what they're saying? That must be what they're saying. They could not be suggesting that there was a problem. Absolutely not. There is no problem. So number 4, he says, skill learning of every kind is accomplished by trial and error, mentally correcting aim after an error until a successful motion, movement, or performance has been achieved. After that, further learning and continued success is accomplished by forgetting the past errors and remembering the successful response so that it can be imitated. And these could sound like things to do. Like, I'm going to try to forget these past errors. All those things happen naturally in flow. And flow is the natural result of being as you are, completely fulfilled, and not interpreting things as saying that this is a problem because it's a seeming mistake or seeming failure or a seeming negative feedback. That's illusory. God does everything. Are you suggesting that God does not do everything perfectly? You just remain as you are, completely fulfilled, and you witness all these things happening in flow. In body, experientially, you feel the flow. Ananda mind is released. Ananda mind binds to the CB1, CB2 receptors, and the individual experiences bliss. Ananda mind is named after the Sanskrit word Ananda, which means bliss or joy or happiness or peace. So, joy of simply existing, peace of simply existing, bliss of simply existing. You are completely fulfilled. What do you do to be fulfilled? Nothing. You do absolutely nothing to be fulfilled. You are fulfilled. To prove the point, you could sit down right now and physically even do nothing. I know we're talking about snowboarding, where do nothing in that context is not trying to force or control, which we'll talk about in the next point. But even physically sitting down in a meditation, Ananda mind is released. Why is it that a person physically feels so great during a meditation? And they can describe it as peace or happiness or joy or bliss or fulfillment. You do nothing to be fulfilled. You are fulfilled. That's what I mean by I am fulfilled. You are fulfilled. We are fulfilled. And as mentioned, the individuals that were able to manifest that which they desire effortlessly, without the stress and frustration, remained as they are. And if they forget it, that's okay. No shame, no condemnation. We had a conversation about that, and then they remembered who they are. And body continues to spontaneously flow. What they do, what they did not do, what they say, what they did not say, etc. Emotions, thoughts, all these things spontaneously, naturally happen without resistance. God does everything. And again, this is not based on conjecture. This is based on results of building 3 successful businesses, generating millions of dollars, helping clients generate millions of dollars. Matthew 7:16, ye shall know them by their fruits. And what he's pointing to is what is called the original simplicity, the simple truth that is profound. That still I am presence was everything that you desired for in this whole life. And as you are that pure awareness witnessing all these things, the natural manifestation of that is what we can call all these things that are symbols of fulfillment. Desire points to fulfillment, and you remain fulfilled along the way. And thus these things, what he was saying here, mentally correcting, forgetting the past errors, it happens naturally. In snowboarding, I don't remember how many times I've fallen down. I remember a few falls. Yet I know that when I got back onto the slopes, my body adjusted for better performance. But there was no problem. Actually, there was a joy of repeatedly doing the same thing again and again and again. Just as there's joy doing the things, for example, with the entrepreneurs that I work with, they had experienced so much joy in the prospecting, lead generation, client acquisition, marketing, sales. They didn't have any resistance towards it. And if it was not the thing that they loved to do, let's say they were focusing on their product or their service or the fulfillment or something else, spontaneously what would happen was people would show up to be in contribution. They would take on those roles. They would bring on a firm. And again, all those things happen naturally in flow. Number 5, he says, you must learn to trust your creative mechanism to do its work and not jam it by becoming too concerned or too anxious as to whether it will work or not, or by attempting to force it by too much conscious effort. Let it work rather than make it work. This is it. The relationship with God. We just learn more and more so to force less, to try less, to release the control more and more so. The control dissolves and the fruits appear. That's why I really like what Neville Goddard said here. I mean, I experience enormous peace when I read this. He says, what you now desire, you already have. Desire points to fulfillment. Anytime a desire arises, thank you, I have. Thank you, I am. I am fulfilled. I am fulfilled. In business, for example, I am fulfilled if they say this or they say that. If the market change, if the market doesn't change, I am fulfilled. And practically speaking, you see the opportunities. Sun Tzu in The Art of War, opportunities multiply as they are seized. The greatest opportunity is this gift of life where you get to know who you are and be as you are, from which naturally what spontaneously manifests are all these things, which we can call opportunities. Therefore, to remain as you are, completely fulfilled, know who you are. You are that still I am presence. That still I am presence, that is the fulfillment. That is the bliss. That is the happiness. That is the joy. That is the peace. It took me a while to get to this point. I don't regret it. Now I teach it in a way where my intention is that there are those that would hear this message and they will get to this point faster. It doesn't have to take them that long. And I've worked with many individuals that they were thinking the way I was thinking prior to when I read Think and Grow Rich. And then I have a conversation with them and they know exactly what it is that I'm talking about here. Just as you know exactly what I'm talking about here. It's undeniable. To deny what is being pointed to is denying the fact that you exist. Existence is the fulfillment. Existence is the love, is the happiness, is the peace, is the bliss, the fulfillment that you desire. That is it. Not because of this or that appearance. You experience it with, yes, I agree with that. You experience fulfillment with the car, with the relationship, with the snowboarding, with the task, with the hobby, with the business. Along the way, you experience fulfillment. Of course, you experience it with. Yet you experience fulfillment with or without those physical materializations or physical objects, life experiences. Fulfillment for no reason. Bliss for no reason. How wonderful is this? You go out with a group of friends, you know who you are now, and they say, oh yeah, you've changed so much. You're at peace, you're fun to be around, there's no neediness, no trying to control, always having a wonderful time. That's just a natural result of being as you are. You can say it to them that way. They might not know what you're talking about, but that's okay. That's an opportunity. They might be open to have that conversation with you. Like I was open to have the conversation with Napoleon Hill in Think and Grow Rich. Like you're open to have this conversation with me right now because it is crystal clear. It is undeniable truth. Truth, consciousness, bliss. You are that perfection. You are that fulfillment. And desire was simply pointing to the fact that you are fulfilled. When you know that you are fulfilled, whatsoever things you desire, which are going to happen anyway, spontaneously happen naturally in flow. So I just found this video to be helpful. Let's conclude this with an auto suggestion to further encourage. You could say, knowing that I am completely fulfilled, the natural result of being as I am are all these fruits that people know me by, the manifestations of fulfillment. As I know that I am completely fulfilled, whatsoever things I desire spontaneously happen naturally, automatically in flow. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk with you soon. Take care.